We're down to the last two teams in the college football season as we have Indiana going up against Miami in the national championship. So before we break down the X's and O's, let's talk about these two teams and how they got here, starting with Indiana. Year two under Kirk Cignetti, went to the playoffs last year, this year, undefeated and in the championship game. How impressive of a run has it been for Cignetti in Indiana so far?
It's phenomenal. Like we're in this time and place where we always try to call something the greatest ever or beyond compare, and a lot of times that leads itself to exaggeration. This really isn't exaggeration. Like I can't think of something to compare this to. When you think Indiana was one of the worst college football programs, not just in the Big Ten, but in the entire country. When you think about through the lens of the Power Four in particular, Indiana was in a pit. It used to take them 4 seasons to win 15 games. Now they're 15-0 this season, trying to become the first 16-0 team. And so, there are a lot of factors at play. Obviously, NIL and the transfer portal help turn around a program in ways that you couldn't before, but that doesn't really take away just how impressive this has been by Curt Cignetti. And he's done it with a bit of a blend. Like he's got some of his guys from JMU that he brought along with him when Indiana hired him from James Madison. They're now stars for the Hoosiers. He's got a few players that he inherited from the previous coaching staff that he's coached up and developed. And then he's made some other good finds in the transfer portal beyond his JMU guys like Fernando Mendoza, obviously the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, and he's just blended it beautifully. And I think this guy can coach ball too. That much is evident. So, you add it all up, and this is a veteran team that is playing above its recruiting star level, but I think these are really talented guys too. They were just sort of flying below the radar a little bit, in the recruiting services.
Speaking of flying below the radar, Miami came in the season ranked as 2 at one point before losses to Louisville, SMU. They went under the radar, sneaked into the playoffs on the last official votes by the committee. How has this team gotten back to that number 2 overall field or top 2 team in college football after a rough patch during the middle of the season?
Well, Carson Beck stopped throwing so many interceptions. I hate to reduce it to something so simple, but you look at Miami's 2 losses. When they lost to Louisville, Beck threw 4 interceptions. They lost to SMU, Beck threw 2 interceptions. Since that loss to SMU on November 1st and the 7 games since then, Beck has just thrown 2 interceptions total. So he had 6 picks in the 2 losses, just 2 since then. And that's really the simplest answer. And Miami, when they weren't turning the ball over so darn much, they were able to get back to what they're really good at. I mean, this is a nasty defense. We've seen it throughout this entire playoff, throughout most of the season. That's why most of us thought back in September, like this is a team that could make a run at this thing. We saw that defense, how good it was, the way it was built. That looked like a national championship caliber defense. And Beck was playing good back in September. Then he kind of caught the interception bug in the middle of the season, got over that. And now I just feel like Miami has really honed in on its identity, which is they're great at the line of scrimmage, both on defense and offense. I mean, the defensive line is so disruptive, but that offensive line is sturdy. They're good in the run game with Mark Fletcher. They got some playmakers at wide receiver. And I don't want to call Carson Beck a game manager because he's better than that, but he's like a game manager deluxe, that upgraded game manager where, and I think he's kind of settled into that role. He stopped making so many mistakes, and this guy can make plays. I mean, we know he's got a great arm. He's got a strong arm, but he's got to be throwing it to his team. He's been doing that lately, and then even threw in the scramble touchdown out of the pocket for the game winner against Ole Miss. So, I think they cleaned it up a little bit and just really honed in on what they're good at, which is dominating at the lines of scrimmage.
Yeah, we talk about the line of scrimmage. Looking at Miami, can they slow down the tempo of this Indiana offense to make this less of a shootout and more of a defensive showdown?
Yeah, I think they need to get some pressure on Fernando Mendoza, which can be difficult to do, but that's what Miami's good at, right? I mean, they're disruptive at the line of scrimmage. I think they have to affect the quarterback. I mean, you heard Curt Cignetti after the blowout win against Oregon. We were all trying to figure out, what was the secret sauce in these past couple blowout wins. And Cignetti, I don't think he was trying to be boring. I think he was trying to be truthful. He said, it comes down to the basics. You got to be good at the line of scrimmage. You got to protect your quarterback, affect their quarterback, and win the turnover battle. And Indiana's been doing all those things. And so I think for Miami, What can you do? Well, you got to lean on your strengths. I think Miami's got to get to Fernando Mendoza, try to get pressure on him. We didn't see Oregon. They only sacked him once. Miami's got to get more pressure on him than that. If you let Mendoza work in the pocket, I think those Indiana wide receivers are they're top shelf, and they do not drop passes. Indiana, Mendoza puts it on the money more times than not. And those guys just aren't they're not going to drop it. I mean, you could count their drops probably on one hand for the whole season. So I think that's what it comes down to for Miami. Can they get pressure on the quarterback? If they can, I think that forces some punts. I think that forces, some shorter drives. And and then you got to get that run game going if you're Miami too. Control the time of possession, control the tempo by keeping the ball in your hands and get Fletcher going in the run game.
Well, that leads to my next question. If Indiana does slow down that Miami run game, do you trust Carson Beck now to lead this team to a win after what we saw versus Ole Miss?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that he can do it by himself. Like there are some quarterbacks out there. We saw Trinidad Chambliss do this against Georgia earlier in the playoff, where he almost kind of put the team on his back and said, "I got this, boys." I don't know if Carson Beck can do that against Indiana. I mean, it's a really good Indiana defense, maybe the best defense in the country. And the way I described Beck earlier, game manager deluxe, I think that's sort of the best role for him. I think he needs his weapons around him working. I think he needs that run game going some for him to be at his best. He needs to know he's got his defense working. So I don't know. If he's got to go into the phone booth, put on the Superman outfit, I don't know that I trust him to do that. So I think he needs his supporting cast humming for Miami to have a shot in this one.
All right, when it comes down to this game, what is your biggest X factor and what will determine who wins this game?
I think it's the fact that Indiana just does not beat itself. They don't make mistakes. It's remarkable. And I know some of it probably comes down to the fact that they're a veteran team, but it's a veteran team plus a well-coached team. You look at turnover margin, Indiana's tops in the country. They take the ball away quite a bit, and they don't turn the ball over. You look at penalties, this is not a heavily penalized team. You look at some of those intangibles, like against Oregon, they blocked a punt. I mean, all those types of winning football plays that sometimes gets overlooked a little bit because you got a Heisman Trophy quarterback, right? I mean, there's so much focus on that and individual stars like Elijah Surratt, the wide receiver, D'Angelo Pons, the DB that had the pick six against Oregon. They got good individual players, but to me, the X factor is that just collectively, Indiana is not going to beat itself. At least they haven't all season, and so you got to go out and beat them. And that's really tough to do because they're stinking good, right? They're not going to help you along the way. And so that's why I like Indiana in this game is position by position, they're rock solid. But then when you throw in those intangibles, the X factor of the fact that they're not going to make miscues, they're not going to help you along the way, that makes them tough.
All right, so it sounds like you have Indiana winning. What is your game prediction? And how much do you have Indiana winning by?
Yeah, I do have Indiana winning, and then the question becomes, are we going to see another blowout? I mean, they blew out Alabama, they blew out Oregon. I don't think we're going to see another blowout to that degree. I mean, I go back to Miami beating Ohio. Miami's had several impressive wins, to get to this point, but really that win against Ohio State, I mean, that showed you Miami's pretty legit. When they're not making mistakes, they're legit. And so I think they can hang, but I just think Indiana's better. And again, I don't think they're going to beat themselves. So I'd take Indiana probably by about 2 touchdowns, 14 points. I think it's a game in the fourth quarter, which would be more than we could say, for the last 2 games Indiana's played. But if Indiana wins, then we're going to be talking about, was this the greatest team ever? And that's a complicated debate. It'll be a fun debate. One thing they can say, I don't know whether they'll be the greatest team ever. That probably depends on your age, depends on your perspective, what team you personally root for. But if they do win, they'll be 16-0. We haven't seen a 16-0 champion yet because this is just the second year of the 12-team playoff. So that nobody could take away from them. Whether the greatest ever, we can debate that. Nobody will be able to take away that they were the first team to go 16-0.